right. So, welcome back to Thinking Outside the Bank, which is just not obviously about creative real estate, but also how people face different obstacles and challenges in life by thinking creatively, thinking outside the box. So, with that in mind, I'd like to welcome our guest today, Teresa Villaruz. Teresa, welcome to Thinking Outside the Bank.
Well, thank you, Trevor. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited to get into some nuggets. I know you and I know each other from Owners Club. We just spent some time together this summer in beautiful Monterey, which I believe you call home, correct?
Yes, sir. Monterey is my home. It's a
I,
beautiful town. It's a quiet town, a place where I definitely needed to move to because I came from the Bay Area, right? Where it's like always go, 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 hustle, hustle, hustle. And I needed the peace. So moved 1 hour away from my old hometown here in beautiful Monterey.
it's a beautiful place. Again, we got to spend about 10 days down there with my family and exploring that. Big Sur holds a special place in my heart as well. I did the Big Sur Marathon here a few years ago and just fell in love with the whole place. So I am truly jealous and I can't wait to dig in. And I think what I'll start with is actually kind of sharing a little of your background. You mentioned growing up and living in the Bay Area and moving away from your hometown. Give us a little bit of your background and your story that's kind of led you to, your real estate journey.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think in order to do that, I'll kind of give like like a quick view of like where I came from in terms of my childhood as well.
Yes, please.
So I'm Filipino, lived in the Philippines the first decade of my life. We weren't a wealthy family there. My mom had to work overseas just to provide, send money to us so that we could have food on our table, a roof over our heads, clothing on our backs. And on top of that, my dad, it's a two-income household. My dad had to also work, not overseas, but he had to work in a different town. And really, only saw him probably a couple days a week, right? Because he'd have to go out of town, work, and then come back and take care of his little kids. And that kind of pushed me to be an adult at a really, really young age. I started taking care of my younger brother and my sister around the age of 7 to 8. Before at age 11, my mother was able to get us here to the United States. So childhood was pretty much adulthood for me. And while when we moved to the Bay Area where my mother was living at that time, I promised myself that I will do whatever it takes so that my future children wouldn't experience the same childhood that I did, which really wasn't much of a childhood. It was adulthood at such an early age. And so that's where the mentality of like, we gotta hustle, get to that American dream early on so that, my children wouldn't have to worry about that. And so living in the Bay Area, obviously it's like a go, 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 hustle, hustle mentality type of folks there. So that's the community that I was in. My goal at that time was like to attain the American dream, have a home, own my own primary home, have a family with 2.5 children, and really just have a really stable job. And so got into funny enough is I did jump into real estate as a realtor when I was in college. And the reason I did that, even though I hated being a realtor, was so that I could pay for my college tuition and not have this, huge student loans like many Americans have, right? And so did that. Yeah, so did that. And as soon as I graduated, I have a degree in marketing, jumped into digital marketing immediately. And my entire W-2 life, I've only worked for four companies. One was a digital marketing agency, one was Google, and two others are in the fintech space, all based in the Bay Area. And my goal was like, let's just move up that corporate ladder, make as much money as we can so that we don't have to worry about money. The problem with that, though, is that because my focus was like, this is what my family needs money so that we have a comfortable lifestyle. My daughter wouldn't have to worry about, experience poverty and stuff like that. Because my mind was in the hustle, even though I was working from home remotely, I feel that I wasn't able to spend or quality time with my daughter. and my husband. Yes, I was there present in terms of physically, but was I there fully present, meaning, being there for them? I would say no, because my mind, half of it is like thinking about work and all this stuff. I exited my W-2 career as a global leader, so I didn't have a 9 to 5 job. I had an around the clock job because I had to dedicate my time to people in Asia, in EMEA, and all these other countries where then yeah, it just took so much of my time. And I think in 2021, God was like, this is not the life that I wanted for you. And so in 2021, he allowed me, I would say I see it now as a blessing in disguise, but in 2021, I was diagnosed with invasive breast cancer.
Oh,
Now, at that time, obviously, I'm like thinking like this is not real. Like, why is this happening to me? But now that I look back, it was actually a blessing in disguise because if it wasn't for that diagnosis and me going through my cancer journey, I would still be stuck in my W-2 job, still working that corporate ladder, going up and just really focusing on how can I make more, 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 more for my family and not really spending the time with them and also not living my life for the purpose that God has given me. Right. And so, you know, I had a lot of quiet time during my cancer journey, and I spent most of that time having a conversation with our creator, God. And, I asked him like if I'm meant for more, and you give me a second chance, I would dedicate the second part of my life fulfilling that purpose. And so after that, got into, actually after my diagnosis, my husband and I have been real estate investors prior to that as well. We had our strategy then was it was a live and flip. So we purchased our primary, renovated it while we're living in it, and then after a few years, flipped it, and then on to the next project. And so that's what we did for until the pandemic happened. And at which point, we didn't know when contractors will come back because at that, the
yeah.
first few months, they weren't
Yep.
considered essential workers. It wasn't until later,
Yep.
right? And so we're like, we can't do this. What's our next strategy? And so our strategy was to do, we did buy and hold in the midterm and short-term rental space. But anyway, so I was like, the reason why I mentioned that was because my husband and I were asset rich, cash poor.
Tough.
And because my cancer, the cost of my medical bills, doctor visits, and everything was over $275,000.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. We're like, how are we going to pay for this? We would have to liquidate everything.
Everything.
Everything. And so for when the bill started coming in, like our backs were against the wall, we had that tough conversation. And, before we took the leap of selling everything, I did what I could do. The only thing I could do was ask God for guidance, right? And ask him like, if we're supposed to liquidate all our assets, give me clarity. And I kid you not, that same week, my life insurance agent, who happens to be my husband's aunt, called me because she heard about my diagnosis. And she said, you know that life insurance policy that I forced you to buy when your daughter was born? Well, that has living benefits. And like, what is that? you
Yeah.
know,
Something people don't hear about.
People don't hear about that. And essentially, she said, because I was diagnosed with a qualifying illness, what cancer is, that I'm able to accelerate the death benefit of my life insurance policy and use it for however I need, right? And I took that as, my answer or the answer to my prayers
Yep.
to the Lord and accelerated my death benefit. Didn't have to liquidate any of our assets, thank God. And so, with that said, the purpose or the calling that I believe God has put me, and the reason why He put me through that cancer journey is now He wants me to see that mo Americans are experiencing this, but they're not lucky to have the financial backing like you have.
Yeah,
And
so true.
so for me, my calling is to protect as many Americans as I can so that, you know, stats show that 70% of Americans, that's 7 out of 10, will either get diagnosed of cancer, heart attack, or stroke.
Yep.
7 out of 10. And if they can't afford their treatments and they file for bankruptcy, it shows that 80% of people who file for bankruptcy because of their medical bills have 80% chance of mortality. So, I'm like, that is not right. Like,
Yeah.
even just putting a little bit of money into a life insurance policy just so that you have that coverage can save you. It might be a matter of life and death.
Yeah. That one small little checkbox that maybe your life insurance agent knew about that some others don't. And most people that are investing in life insurance, I remember when we had this conversation, my wife and I got married of life insurance. I said, what life insurance? I'm 23 years old. Like what, nothing's gonna happen. At that age, you think you're bulletproof. And now I'm 36 and 37 as of yesterday, excuse me. And
Yeah,
you
happy
don't
birthday.
think about this stuff. Thank you. You don't think about this stuff. And especially I mentioned before, my background is as healthcare worker in W-2. I shared years and years of people who had strokes and were recovering from that. And I saw the incredible, incredible, incredible financial stresses that it put on a family, that it put on an individual, especially a single individual. A lot of people who
Mhm.
have strokes don't recover, or heart attack, or again, cancer. These can
Yeah.
be life altering for the negative. For the negative, people file bankruptcy. People end up homeless because of them. So that is truly an inspiring story, and I really want to lean into a couple things you said.
Yeah.
I love 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 that you leaned into your faith, and when life dealt you quite possibly the hardest diagnosis that some people may never even realize, you leaned into not remorse and, why me, but okay, God, this is part of your plan. And, you know, you rededicated your life, the second half of your life, to doing good. And not to say you were doing bad before that, but leaning into that and saying, God, show me the way.
Hmm.
And I love that again because of someone who's had to do that very similar, the past year of when my plan didn't match what his plan was for my life. And I really leaned into my faith and saying, okay, God, I realized I was leaning into what I thought I was supposed to be doing versus, what you thought. Show me some signs, lead me, guide me from here. I'm paying attention. And ever since then, I was always the person who stressed about money and climbing the corporate ladder and making more and helping more people. But ever since I've again that mindset shift and leaning into my faith, things have seemed to get easier versus harder.
Amen.
I don't always know when the next paycheck's coming or the next project or the next deal, but again, and it's a constant struggle. What is one thing I would say, especially how has your faith played a role in some of those risks that you've had to take since then, especially as a real estate investor? How have you continued to leverage and lean into, your relationship with our creator? And I love this.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I wish my husband was here because every time like I fall like not fall in love, but I think like, okay, we should invest in this or do this, just because I have this feeling. And I think, the signs that I'm getting from through prayer, through like, just listening to God, it's taking us this way. And my husband's like, oh my gosh, you got to show me the numbers. Of course, I'll show you the numbers, but before I show you the numbers, what this is the path that God is putting us through. And so for me, like before, like similar to you, right? Before jumping into, just having faith in the Lord and more putting, like, I was really a control freak. I want everything, like, I need to put my hands on everything.
Yep.
I need to make sure that this happens and that happens and that happens. And when I think about it now, it's like, that's actually when I was most stressful, is when I'm trying to, like, have so much control on things that is not even in his plan,
Mhm.
right? But once I've let go, similar to you, it seems like things are just falling into place. Just making sure that, obviously you still have to do your due diligence. You still have to like crunch the numbers. You still have to like make sure that things would work out. But if God is calling you this way, then I just like I'll just take that leap of faith because everything is through his plan, you know.
Absolutely.
When you try to control everything, that's when things get stressful. That's when things kind of actually fall apart.
So true. Definitely fall apart. And a lot of times I will voice it as faith versus fear. Am I
Mm,
going to let fear dominate my thought process and make everything worse and bleed in and make me so stressed out that I let that bleed over to my family and then they see that and it stresses them out? Or am I going to have faith that I'm going through this? This is happening for me, not to me,
mhm.
leaning into those little mindset shifts. So, um, being that faith versus fear, if I pose it as that,
Yeah,
how do you choose? How do you choose when things like that are dealt to you?
absolutely faith. Jumping into faith. Obviously, you know, I jump into prayers a lot. My husband will like see me every now and then. He's like, I think I counted and you were praying like 20 times today.
One of those
Right.
days.
And it's just having that faith in God and the Lord that He already has a plan for you. He has a plan for you to get to Z, but He doesn't want to show you the entire path because you'll just like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go through
Yeah,
that.
it's
So
overwhelming.
exactly, it's so overwhelming, and I think that's kind of like what scares a lot of people is that they have this huge Mount Everest that God has put on them. But if God shows you every single step of that, you know, to hike that Mount Everest, you might be too scared and not fulfill the purpose that He has given you. But if He shows you just the first three steps and have faith that He has the plan for the rest, right? Then things will be a lot easier and less stressful, less overwhelming. So just have faith that what you're seeing right now is just three steps, but know that whatever that Mount Everest is, He has a plan for you. It's kind of like, you know, when you have your GPS, right? When you're trying to go somewhere, it's not going to tell you. Obviously, you could see like the overall route, but when it's telling you directions, it's taking you one turn at a time rather than giving you all the turns and you have to figure how to get there immediately. So,
I
yeah,
love that. Like your
just
your faith GPS. It's turn by
yes,
turn, not the entire trip.
exactly.
I love that. I love that. So I think we talked a lot about your mindset and your shift and some
Mhm.
things when dealt with some life things. I want to kind of focus on your real estate, shift and some of those things that obviously you mentioned corporate world before that, W-2, digital marketing. And
Yeah.
I know you leverage still obviously some of those skills. What are you involved in now with creative real estate and owners club? What are some things you're going after and how do you use your background in that digital marketing space to, add value to others and to what you're doing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, right now, the Mount Everest that God has put in my heart is to help 5,000 people in 5 years get out of this just hustling to survive cycle, which I was in, and finally help them get into thriving mode. And which is the reason why I called this Mount Everest the Thrive Movement,
Love it.
right? We're helping you thrive. And it's building these three pillars to hold that up. The first pillar is, like I mentioned earlier, now I'm on a mission to protect people, as many people as I can, through life insurance. So I'm a life insurance agent. But not a lot of people know that life insurance is actually another way for you to creatively get into real estate investing,
Really
right? Yeah. So
interesting.
I'm not sure if you've heard it, but and Pace is so huge about this. Infinite banking.
I've heard it. I don't know if you want to give a brief overview.
Yeah,
Share. Yeah.
absolutely. So infinite banking essentially is replicating what the banks are doing, right? So there's two things that the banks are really good at. One is getting those high rates of return because when they deploy loans such as car loans, mortgages, credit cards, for example, they get anywhere from 5% to 30%, right? So that's one. The second thing is they're also really good at not taking any risk because the money that they're sending out is not their money. It's
Yep.
our money, the depositors, right? And because they're using our money, it's only right for them to share some of the profit with us, right? So they give us 0.25% when they're getting 30%.
Yeah. Yeah. The
Very generous.
cash back return. Super generous, right?
Exactly. Now you're thinking, well, they're using my money. I'm taking the risk. Like, how come I'm not getting those high rates of returns? And that's where infinite banking comes into play. Let's replicate what they're doing so that we get most of the benefits or we get 100% of the benefits because, you know, we're using our money. So let's just say that, you want to get those high rates of return. Let's tackle those two things, getting
Hmm.
high rates of return and two, not risking any of our money, right? So first thing is getting those high rates of return. You're in real estate, same as me, right?
Yep.
We know that money grows when money flows. It can't be just stuck in a IRA or it can't just be stuck in a savings account. We have to make it flow in order for it to grow. So, real estate investing is one good tool or strategy to do that. I'm a gator, which means I lend on my money out. So let's just say that, Trevor, let's just say you have $100,000 in your Chase Bank,
Hmm.
right? $100,000. And a fix and flipper comes to you and says, Trevor, I have this flip that I want to do. I need $50,000. If you lend that to me, once I flip it, I'll give you your $50,000 back plus 20% return. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Sounds great. So what you do is let's just say you're $100,000 in the bank, Chase Bank, and you have to deplete that by $50,000 to give to Mr. Fix and Flipper,
Hmm.
right? Now you're getting the first part, which is getting those high rates of return because by deploying your money, you're getting 20% in that deal.
Hmm.
Great. However, you're still taking 100% of the risk because what if Mr. Fix and Flipper is a bad actor and runs
Yeah.
away with your money to go on a fancy vacation?
Yeah.
Ooh, you just paid for someone's luxury vacation and you're not getting anything from that.
No,
So
I don't like
how
that.
do, yeah, exactly. You were expecting 20%, right? But instead you lost $50,000. So, how can we mitigate that risk and make sure that none of your money is at risk? And that's where infinite banking comes into play because what you the best way to actually implement that strategy is by leveraging life insurance policies. Now, not all life insurance policies can implement this strategy. There's two types. One is the traditional kind, which is only good if something happens to you, whether that you get too sick or God calls you home. That's what I was able to do when I was diagnosed with cancer.
Hmm.
But the second type of policy is what we call a cash value life insurance policies. Now, these types of policies, you can find whole life, index universal life, variable life, and different other policies out there. But these policies are great because they have two components to them. The first component is that obviously it's life insurance. Anything happens to you, you're covered or you're at least financially. The second thing is that it has a component that's attached to your life insurance contract, whether you use it or not, and that is a cash account. And what I call that is so that it resonates with everyone. It's similar to a high yield savings account
Okay.
because that account can yield anywhere from 3.5% to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10%, or even more, depending on the type of policy that you have and how you're allocating your money within that policy,
Hmm.
right?
Interesting.
Now, let's just say you're $100,000 rather than in a traditional bank, it's in the savings component of your policy, $100,000. Mr. Fix and Flipper with similar deal, $50,000 need, you get 20% return on top of what he borrowed. Once he flips it, you say, that's a good deal. Let me jump into that. Rather than depleting your savings account, though, you leave everything there. Your entire $100,000 is in the savings account because it's earning, let's just say, 6% conservatively,
Hmm.
right? My policy right now is earning 8%. So let's just say it's earning 6% just to be conservative. What you do though is don't touch that, but you use it as collateral to get $50,000 of the life insurance company's money. So you borrow against your policy,
Hmm.
use it as collateral. You get $50,000 of the life insurance company's money to give to Mr. Fix and Flipper, right?
Okay.
So three things here. One, now you're getting those high rates of return like the banks do. You're getting 6% on your policy, that entire $100,000. Plus, you're getting 20% return on $50,000 that you borrowed from the life insurance company with Mr. Fix and Flipper. So now you're getting 6 plus 20, right? Now, The second thing is now you're transferring the risk to the life insurance company because you're not using your money, you're using
Way
their
better.
money, which is similar to what the banks are doing, right? They're
Yeah.
using
Yeah.
our money. So in this scenario, we're using the life insurance company's money.
Hmm.
So that if anything happens with this Mr. Fix and Flipper goes on vacation with that money, your entire $100,000 is still safe in your savings account, earning 6%,
Hmm. So
right?
how is say things go wrong, Mr. Fix and Flipper runs away with the life insurance's money.
Yeah.
What's the recourse there?
So the life insurance company is okay with that. So this is the reason we also say when you leverage infinite banking, you become your own bank because you determine the repayment terms. You can either pay it back when the next deal closes, right? And hopefully that Mr. Fix, second Mr. Fix and Flipper doesn't run away with your money.
Yeah.
Or second, you can say, I want to treat this like a mortgage and pay it over 30 years on a monthly payment. Or you can even say, hey, Mr. Life Insurance Company, I don't want to pay for this while I'm alive. And they're okay with that because, again, the
Interesting.
first thing is that this is a life insurance policy. So what they'll do is when God calls you home, they'll just take out the borrowed money
Hmm.
from the death benefit before they give the rest to your family,
Gotcha. Okay.
right?
So I would still say, and you and I are both Gators. I think the
Yeah.
most important part that people need to know is lending money is still risky. Of course, there's
Mhm.
still ways to lose it. I'm much more of a what I call a relationship lender versus there's deals that fly around every day promising 20-25% return. And I think Teresa would agree with me. It's most important to vet your deal, but also vet your borrower because people come in
Mhm.
with good intentions, but maybe not quite the experience or the contractors or the things like that to get the job done. So
Mhm.
first and foremost, vet the deal. Secondly, and ultimately, I would still say vet the borrower and make sure you're comfortable. And any money you're willing to lend out, be willing to lose that as well, because it is a risk first reward, of course. But I think this is a really, really cool strategy, Teresa, that I'm going to have to look more into. I obviously, being in Pace's group, I know I've heard the infinite baking and there's so many things that that we get thrown every day that I'm trying to hone in my focus. This is definitely one that as a lender,
Yeah.
I really am going to have to go look at because I have a life insurance policy like I mentioned that I took out and not knowing what exactly I can do with that. But I also do
Yeah.
know that I can come to you and say, Teresa, I know you're a life insurance agent. Could you help me with this? Right. So,
Yeah,
and I'm sure there's a lot
absolutely.
of other people that could utilize your services too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and the another bonus to that too is that it's not only are you getting those high rates of return, not only are you transferring the risk so that none of your money is at risk, but third is you're actually increasing your working capital as well because $100,000 of your own money, and yes, the $50,000 is borrowed money, but it's working for you,
Yeah.
right? So
Are there
that's
limits to that you can leverage against your life insurance policy? I'm sure there are, obviously.
Yeah, so the limitation is you can only borrow as much as what you have in your savings account, right? So let's just say you've put $100,000 in the savings account, you can't borrow more than that.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay. And that savings account is your own cash that you put in there, correct? Just like a normal.
correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Interesting. Okay.
Correct.
I got to
Yeah,
look more
so
into this.
yeah, absolutely. So the premiums, if you have the right type of policy, a cash value life insurance policy, the premiums that you pay the life insurance is split. One goes to the cost of having an insurance, and whatever is remaining after that goes into the savings component of your policy.
Hmm.
So it's really important for you to really understand your policy, whether it's structured properly and whether you're funding it properly for infinite banking. Because a lot of people may have the right type of policy, maybe it's structured, but they're not funding it properly, which means
Hmm.
then they don't have as much in their savings account to leverage.
Interesting. I know I'm going to have you take a look at my policy. No.
And I'd be more than happy to take an audit. And usually
Awesome.
what I tell people is like, I'll audit it, and it might be the right type of policy. It's just being underfunded, and I'll give you recommendations on how to do so.
Awesome. Awesome. Now you mentioned that was one component, right? You said you had
Yeah.
three pillars. What are the other two? I know I'm interested.
Yeah. So the first pillar is I'm rebranding it as Thrive Banking rather than Infinite Banking.
Okay.
Let's get you into a policy. Now, the second pillar is what I call the Thrive Capital Collective. Now, I'm not sure about you, Trevor, but in Gator, what I'm seeing is that people come into Gator because the barrier to entry is lower than sub two.
Yes.
People come into Gator thinking, oh, I only need a couple $1,000. And once I learn what to do, the $5,000 that I have in a bank is enough to give out for EMD. But it's not.
I learned that hard truth pretty quick too.
Yeah. So you go in there and you see like all these deals, all these requests are anywhere from minimum 25,000, 50,000, $100,000. And so a lot of the gators that I've talked to, and I've talked to close to 300 gators. And when I did our follow-up call, majority of them say that they're not doing it anymore because they're not finding the deals, they're not doing this, or because when you see these minimums of 25,000, $50,000, and you only have $5,000 in the bank, you kind of get discouraged because those are like out of your price range. And so a lot of them kind of like fade back and say that that's not their focus anymore, which is a shame because this is a path that could essentially help you thrive in the future, right? And so the second pillar that I'm building is what I'm building within Fractional. Essentially, it's a real estate investment club. We will all be active investors. We'll learn as we grow. So let's just say that you funded your life insurance policy, and I've structured it in a way that within the first year, you should have enough equity there, $5,000. You have $5,000 in your Thrive banking policy.
Mhm.
Let's leverage that to get you into this Thrive Capital Collective, this investment club that we're building. You put in your funds. Now that funds is not to pay to get in, right? It's the money that you're putting into the pool of funds that we will use then to jump into the third pillar, which is what I call the Thrive Impact Projects. Now, the Thrive Impact Projects are real estate projects that will bring in a high enough revenue for us that makes sense for our investment. But second, we want these projects to not only help and impact our lives as the investors, but we want it to help society and the community as well, have an impact there so that we're not only thriving, but the community is also thriving because of our money. So it's having that
Love it.
double impact of our dollars.
Love that.
Thank you. So that's the three pillar system that I'm calling the Thrive movement.
Very cool. Very cool. How did you come up with this?
Um, God, I would say so. Squat up, Pace was like, okay, your homework during squat up is to figure out what your Mount Everest is. And so figured out what my Mount Everest is, and that is like helping other people like me who are like really, even though I was making a lot of money, right? As a W-2 employee, I was still struggling, meaning that, I was struggling, meaning not, I'm just a little over living paycheck to paycheck, right? What
Mhm.
people don't know is that 78% or 78% of people or Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and majority of them are making six figures,
Yeah,
which is insane. People
crazy.
think that, you know, people who are living paycheck to paycheck are only making like, poverty line income. No, it's not. People who are making six figures are still struggling,
Yep.
especially with what's happening is that on average, your income grows 3.5%, right? Through raise or whatnot. But inflation is like 3.5% or even more.
Yep.
And so you're barely beating inflation. And on top of that, the cost of living is increasing 10 times more than what you're increasing your income.
Yep. Then you add
So
kids to the mix.
yeah, kids in the mix
Yeah.
and so many more things. And so my Mount Everest was to help these people who are really stuck in this cycle of just trying to survive and help them to finally thrive. And Pace keeps talking about like, you can't ignore your active income. And so I was like, God, download into me what I need to do so that I'm not ignoring my active income because we still need to put, food on the table and a roof over our heads and all that stuff. But I do want to make an impact in this world. And I promise you that I'm going to live my second life to fulfill that purpose. And I can't come up with this on my own. God has downloaded that idea in me. So
Yeah.
that's where it's coming from.
That's incredible. And I think one of my next questions was going to actually be about what's something people misunderstand about success. And I think that's a good one because I was that same W-2 worker again, just finally made it to making over six figures and was like, oh, I made it. But my goal was like 7, 8 years prior to that. And once we finally made it, inflation and the cost of living is so high. I live in a pretty big area of like a big metropolis just like you, where
Mhm.
cost of living is high. So even making that salary, especially for, a family of four, it doesn't equal, complete financial freedom. So I had to get
Exactly.
out of that kind of mindset and that thinking to realize there's more that I can do. There's more that I can, explore versus just my W-2 going, clocking in and out every day, working for somebody else,
Mhm.
and starting to explore some of these other ideas. Um, which again, the Thrive banking and some of the things you just, opened up my mind to, I'm like, man, there's so many things out there that people can do. What's one tip you can share as we start to wrap towards the end of this of how do you filter out? Because again, there's so many things that people can get into from um, selling things on Amazon, drop shipping, and all of these things, flipping land, real estate, you name it. It's a dime a dozen of people saying, "Let me sell you my course. Let me sell you this." What's one, practical tip that you might give to the audience to say these are some baseline criteria for how to filter those out and how to maybe make their choice of something to follow outside of their normal W-2?
Yeah, no, I've fallen into those as well. Like when I was chasing, how can I make more money? How can I make more money? And not really first have that conversation with God as to what is the path that is right for me. I mean, I've done drop shipping. I've done, Amazon FBA. I've done so many things that did well for a little bit, but then the passion just left, right?
Mhm.
Because it wasn't the path for me.
Yeah,
But once I had that conversation and really with God and really just figure out what is the path for me, that's where I got into life insurance sales. And not just that, but because life insurance, I learned so much more about like what these products can do. I was able to marry the two things that I'm passionate about, which is life insurance plus real estate by talking about infinite banking, right? And so because of that, like you could see in the way like I talk about these things, I just have more energy talking about
I
them
can tell.
versus like, you know, Amazon FBA or like all these other things. Like that would be a dull conversation
Well,
for
that and
me.
it directly, I mean, relates to something that's ultimately, I would say, changed your life. Like you said,
Hmm.
that life insurance policy that you mentioned and the details you shared, that changed your life. It changed the trajectory of your life and your family's life. Had that, not been a factor,
Yeah.
finances may be very, very different. And I'm again very similar. Like we said, there's that one thing in there that you realize it's not just coincidence,
Hmm.
it's faith. Faith has led us to this point. And if we don't listen, you know, eh, to our creator, that higher power that's calling to us, telling us these things, the signs are undeniable. You just have to
Right.
be willing to see them and then follow them and again, follow them by faith, like we talked about, versus fear. And I really love that
Absolutely.
again, you've kind of now shaped your path forward around that life incident that again ruins some people's lives. Now you may look back in a couple of years and be like, that actually made my trajectory and my family's life so much better
Hmm.
by listening, by reflecting, talking to God, and then moving forward on it. And I can't explain how much I love that you leaned into that and just your story overall. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, yeah, definitely before you jump into that next course or this next strategy or this next side hustle, really think about, whether like for people who might not be believers, right? Just have that deep conversation within yourself and like really see think if this is the right path for you. Because if you don't have the passion for it, then you're not gonna when the first challenge comes up, you're like, I'm backing out.
yep,
But when you're passionate about it and you feel that this is your calling and this is your purpose, then regardless of how much bumps on the road you face, you're gonna keep pushing forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Teresa. And again, I love that. I love some of the nuggets and things that you've shared today. Um, Before we sign off,
Yeah.
anything that you'd like to share with our guests in terms of, again, I'm going to lean into the thinking outside the bank and thinking creatively when life throws you challenges. What's one call to action that you would want to share with our guests today when it with what thinking outside the bank really means to you?
Yeah. Now, thinking outside the bank, what's calling me is the infinite banking or the thrive banking part, right? So connect with me on Instagram. And that's at Build Wealth with Trey. And I'll respond to your DMs. But the reason for that is because, people think a lot of people, when you talk to them about life insurance, they think this is another expense. This is I need to make more income to get into this. It's not because you have to think creatively, right? One thing is like you might not need to figure out like how to make more income to get into infinite banking. It could be that you have money somewhere that's sitting somewhere, or maybe it's in a strategy that's not working for you. So there's ways for you to take a look at how your money is flowing right now and how can you change the flow so that it's going to start working better for you, right? So it doesn't mean that you have to, again, earn more income to get into infinite banking. Let's look at what you are doing right now and see how we can adjust it so that it's going to start working better for you. So,
Love it.
I know one thing that I wanted to share about
Yeah.
infinite banking is that with my daughter's policy, which is awesome, right? She's earning 8% right now.
Wow.
We borrowed money against her policy, and the cost of borrowing that money from that policy was 4.5%. So even if we didn't do anything with that, she's still netting 3.5%. But because I'm in the community, we've actually used her money to get into investment, or we lent out her money, which is now earning a 12% annualized return.
Wow.
So with that same pool of money, without, if she just used that money and put in the and funded that deal, she's only going to get 12%. But because we flowed it into a Thrive banking policy first before leveraging that to get into this deal, now she's that same pool of money is earning 15.5% for her.
Wow. Wow, that's incredible. And thinking of that of your daughter and what that will mean for her when she comes of age to learn. I'm sure she's learning a ton from her mom and dad.
Yeah,
But she's already gonna be set up for life. That's incredible.
that's what we're building. It's not just about us right now. It's not just about the next generation, but further generations down the road.
I love that. I love that. And I love some of the nuggets you shared today. And as Teresa mentioned, her Instagram handle, please, please, please reach out. She's a wealth of knowledge. We've had a handful of conversations and would love to obviously share her expertise. But I will put all those links in the show notes. And yeah, I want to thank you obviously for joining us, Teresa, and thank all of our listeners, obviously for sharing on another episode of Thinking Outside the Bank, where obviously we're not just talking about creative real estate. It's all about how people think differently in life when faced with obstacles. And we'd love for you to come on and share a story where you had to break away from traditional pathways, whether it be in business, life, faith, and kind of share some of those stories with our listeners so that they can learn, just like I'm sure you learned a ton today from Teresa. So. Until next time, thank you for joining us on Thinking Outside the Bank. See ya.
Thank you so much, Trevor.